There is a piece of wood in the Austrian National Library that has no business being there. It is roughly the size of a large book cover, 50 centimeters long, perhaps 20 wide. The wood is dark, dried brittle by 2,000 years of cave air on its surface. Scratched into the grain in a script called Palmyrene, the writing system of an ancient Syrian city, is a prayer. A ship captain named Abgar, son of Abshimei, wrote it in the summer of 258 CE. He had come from Palmyra, a city in what is now central Syria, to an island at the edge of the known world. He had climbed in the heat nearly 3 kilometers into a cave, and there, in the darkness against a stalagmite, he set this piece of wood down and left it. There is no wood on that island. None. The tablet had to be carried there, from somewhere else, across open ocean, which means Abgar planned to leave it, which means he knew the cave, which means others had come before him, and he had come knowing that. The cave is called Hoke. It sits on the northeastern coast of an island in the Indian Ocean, approximately 240 kilometers east of the Horn of Africa. When Belgian speleologists entered it in the year 2000, they found deep inside, 2 to 3 kilometers from daylight, nearly 250 inscriptions and drawings left by sailors. Not from one civilization, not from 2, from 6. Brahmi, Greek, South Arabian, Palmyrene, Aksumite, Bactrian. 6 writing systems, 6 corners of the ancient world, all of them pointing at the same cave, on the same island over a span of 6 centuries. The island is called Socotra, and the cave is not even close to its deepest mystery. In the 1st century CE, a Greek-speaking merchant wrote what may be the oldest surviving commercial guide to the Indian Ocean. He called it the Periplus of the Erythraean Sea, a navigational manual for traders crossing what we now call the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea. He listed the ports, the winds, the cargo, the dangers. He listed Socotra. He called it Dioscoridou, a Greek rendering of the island's name, though scholars still debate its exact root. He described its inhabitants as having Arab, Indian, and Greek backgrounds. He mentioned ships going to India anchoring here. He listed what the island produced: tortoise shell, cinnamon, aloe, myrrh, frankincense, and above all others, one product, a resin, red as blood, called dragon's blood. The resin came from a tree found nowhere else on Earth, Dracaena cinnabari. The island's people called it blood of the 2 brothers, which preserves an old South Asian myth. A dragon and an elephant fought on Socotra's soil, and from their mingled blood, the tree grew. The resin that drips from its wounds is red, thick, and for 2,000 years of recorded trade, it was worth more by weight than most spices. Medieval alchemists held it could dissolve gold. Venetian glassmakers used it as pigment. The Roman physician Dioscorides described its wound-closing properties in the 1st century CE. Pliny the Elder wrote about it in the same decade. The tree appears in records from Rome, Alexandria, Baghdad, and Calcutta. It grows nowhere but here. Socotra sat at the mouth of the Red Sea, equidistant from India, East Africa, and the Arabian Peninsula, close enough to everything and far enough from everyone to function as a rest stop between worlds. Ships from India heading to Egypt passed Socotra. Ships from Arabia heading to East Africa stopped here. Ships from Egypt heading east used it as a waypoint. For roughly 6 centuries, from 100 BCE to 500 CE, the island saw the passage of the ancient world's entire commercial network. The sailors who came here didn't just trade, they climbed. From the coast to the cave is not a short walk. The path rises steeply through limestone karst. In summer, the heat on that northeastern coast moves the air above the ground in waves, and yet they went. When Peter de Geest and the Socotra karst project pushed deep enough in the year 2000 to reach the inscriptions, they found not only the writing, they found evidence of ritual. Pieces of at least 20 incense burners broken and scattered near the inscriptions. Water vessels positioned to collect drops falling from stalactites. The wooden tablet of Abgar of Palmyra set deliberately against a stalagmite, not dropped, not left by accident, but placed. The cave was a sanctuary. One South Arabian inscription reads, "Abzia came here, and you remained hidden from him." It is a prayer, a complaint. The man who wrote it had come across open ocean, climbed into darkness, burned his incense, offered what he had. The god did not appear. He wrote it down. The full scholarly edition of the cave's corpus was published in 2012 by linguist Ingo Strauch of the Free University of Berlin. It documents 19 legible inscriptions. Of those, 19 are in Western Indian Brahmi script. Most were written by Indian sailors and traders from ports in what is now the state of Gujarat. Some identify themselves as Navikas, sailors. 2 mention the port of Baruch. 1 includes a carefully drawn stupa, painted on a stalagmite in a cave 3,000 kilometers from the nearest Buddhist temple. Strauch's 2019 follow-up argued that some of the Brahmi inscriptions showed Buddhist affiliations, evidence, if confirmed, of Buddhism traveling by sea westward through the Indian Ocean, decades before it reached much of Central Asia by land. None of this was written by someone from Socotra. In 19 legible texts from the cave, 6 centuries of visitors, 6 writing systems, the entire commercial world of the ancient Indian Ocean. Not one inscription is identifiably from an inhabitant of the island. Their voices are not in the cave. They are not anywhere. There's a language called Socotri. It belongs to a cluster of South Semitic tongues linguists called Modern South Arabian, a group that includes Mari and Sheri, spoken on the coast of Yemen and Oman. Socotri is the most archaic of the group. It preserves phonological structures, grammatical forms, and vocabulary that vanished from Arabic, Hebrew, and Aramaic centuries ago. Leonid Kogan, of the Institute for Oriental and Classical Studies in Moscow, has described it as carrying a very archaic linguistic and literary system that in many ways has preserved what we perceive as the biblical world or the ancient Arabic world. This is an unusual thing to say about a language that is still spoken. Most ancient tongues leave traces in their descendants. Socotri is not a descendant. In linguistic terms, it is more like a window open onto something that closed everywhere else a long time ago. And for roughly 4,000 years, from the island's earliest known habitation, it was never written down. Not because its speakers had no exposure to writing. Arabic was accessible for centuries, and many Socotri speakers used it for religious and commercial purposes. The choice not to write Socotri was, in a sense, a choice to keep it oral, to keep it alive only in the mouth, passing from parent to child with no fixed text, no alphabet, no version that could be consulted, corrected, or controlled. The first scientific study of the language was conducted by a Viennese expedition in 1898. David Heinrich Müller led a team that spent months recording vocabulary, grammar, and oral poetry. Their work, published in Vienna in the early 1900s, forms the first written record of a language that had been spoken for millennia. The first systematic writing system for Socotri was not created until 2010. It was developed by a Russian-Yemeni team led by linguist Vitaly Naumkin, working with native informants on the island. The script adapts the Arabic alphabet with 4 additional letters for sounds Arabic does not have. A native speaker named Isa Guman had spontaneously started writing Socotri in Arabic letters that year, just writing, just trying, and that became the beginning. The first book published entirely in Socotri appeared on November 25, 2021. 4,000 years of spoken language, 11 years of writing system. One book. UNESCO classifies Socotri as severely endangered. Speaker estimates vary by source. Figures range from under 50,000 to above 100,000, depending on methodology. What is consistent across every source is the direction of change, downward. Arabic dominates Socotra's schools, its government, its media. Children receive instruction in Arabic. The generation now entering adulthood grew up in a world where Socotri has no official status, no required instruction, no presence in the institutions that shape what a language is allowed to be. When a language ends, what ends with it is not just vocabulary. It is a way of organizing the world. Socotri has words for gradations of wind, for states of landscape, for conditions of living that have no Arabic equivalent and no English translation. The oral poetry recorded by Nomkin's team published in the Corpus of Socotri Oral Literature by Brill in 2014 preserves some of it. The language survived the Romans who traded here. It survived the Portuguese who invaded. It survived a British protectorate, a decade of South Yemeni socialism, and the Soviets who anchored offshore in the 1970s. What it may not survive is the century it is in now, and with it, the oral tradition that may be the only surviving record of who the Socotri people actually are, not who came to the island, not who traded here or prayed here or invaded here, but who was already there when all of them arrived. In 547 CE, a merchant monk from Alexandria named Cosmas Indicopleustes sailed east to document the Christian world. He had already been as far as Sri Lanka. He was compiling as thoroughly as he could a picture of where Christianity had taken root along the Indian Ocean trade routes. His notes, preserved in what is now called the Christian topography, include a brief mention of an island he called Dioscorus. He writes, "The island has Christians, they have clergy. Their priests are ordained in Persia by the Church of the East, the theological tradition later historians would call Nestorian." This is the first firm documentary evidence of a Christian community on Socotra, and it raises an immediate question: how did a bishop of the Church of the East, headquartered in Persia, come to preside over an island in the Indian Ocean, halfway between East Africa and the Indian subcontinent? The tradition, consistent across multiple medieval sources but not directly verifiable, held that St. Thomas, one of the 12 apostles, was shipwrecked on Socotra around 52 CE on his way to spread Christianity in India. The island's Christians, according to later accounts, traced their faith directly to that event. They kept wooden clappers instead of bells. They made crosses, not in the Byzantine style, not in the Roman style, but something that had been evolving in isolation for centuries without correction or instruction from any institutional church. By the time Marco Polo described the island in the 13th century, he reported that its archbishop was one of the most powerful figures in the Indian Ocean trade network, subject only to the Catholicos in Baghdad. He also noted, in his characteristic way, that the island's Christians practiced what he called magic. In Marco Polo's vocabulary, that word covered anything that didn't look like the Christianity he recognized. It didn't look like the Christianity he recognized because it had been alone for a very long time. When the Portuguese arrived in April 1507, they were expecting allies. King Manuel I had sent Tristão da Cunha and Afonso de Albuquerque to the Indian Ocean with orders to blockade the Red Sea and establish a maritime empire. Socotra was to be the pivot point, but there was also a religious dimension. Portugal had heard there were Christians on the island after a century of expeditions along sub-Saharan Africa, of searching for the legendary Prester John, of rumors of a Christian kingdom somewhere to the east. Socotra was supposed to confirm it. What the Portuguese found was not what they had been told to expect. The population spoke a language none of the fleet's interpreters recognized. Their crosses were shaped differently. Their rituals had no recognizable liturgy. Their priests summoned the faithful with wooden clappers. They had no living connection to Rome, none to Constantinople, none to the Nestorian hierarchy in Baghdad, which had effectively stopped maintaining contact with the island by the 14th century, when the sea routes grew too unreliable and the community too remote to administer. The Portuguese took the island by force anyway. Tristão da Cunha's fleet attacked the Mara fort above the capital on the coast. A sheikh named Khawaja Ibrahim held it with approximately 130 defenders. He refused a surrender ultimatum. He did not survive the assault. The garrison took the fort. 4 years later, it was gone. The island was strategically useless once the Portuguese secured Aden's sea approaches. The Christians they had hoped to find as allies turned out to need explanation more than deployment. King Manuel ordered the garrison home in 1511. The Mara returned, but the Christians remained for a while longer. Francis Xavier arrived in 1542, 31 years after the Portuguese left. He found self-described Christians on the island. They claimed descent from Thomas's original converts. They showed him crosses. They asked him for priests, for instruction, for books, for reconnection with a church they remembered existing. Xavier had none to give. He stayed briefly. He left. After Xavier, the written record thins to almost nothing. Occasional travelers mention Christians through the late 17th century as curiosities, as remnants, as people who call themselves Christian without quite being able to explain what that means anymore. By approximately 1680, scholars who have reviewed the surviving historical record date the effective end of Christianity on Socotra. Around 1800, a Wahhabi raid destroyed the physical evidence that remained on the coast. Churches, tombs, crosses. The archaeologist D. Brian Doe, who conducted one of the first systematic surveys of the island in 1967, recorded a place name, Kalisa, derived from the Greek word ekklesia, meaning church. He reported excavated church remains and cross-inscribed stones. Some walled-up cave burials containing bones and carved wooden crosses have been documented since. No intact church stands on Socotra today. The cross-inscribed stones exist. The place named Kalisa exists. The documents, Cosmas in 547, Marco Polo in the 13th century, Xavier in 1542 exist. The buildings they prayed in do not. The ruins of a fort stand on a ridge above Souk, on Socotra's northern coast. For most of the island's modern recorded history, through the British Protectorate, through South Yemeni socialism, through reunification in 1990, those ruins were described as Portuguese. The Portuguese had invaded in 1507. The Portuguese had built a fort. These were the ruins of that fort. This seemed logical. It was wrong. In 2022, archaeologist Julian Jansen van Rensburg completed a 2-month excavation at the site, funded by the Max van Berkom Foundation, and conducted with the Socotra Heritage Project and Yemen's General Organization of Antiquities and Museums. The team took charcoal samples from within the structure. The carbon dates came back. The fire that consumed the standing fort happened at the time of the Portuguese invasion. consistent with an attack in April 1507. But the fort the Portuguese burned was not a fort they had built. The earliest fortification on Jebel Hawari, the excavation showed, dates to the 8th century CE, one of the last remaining Islamic-era structures on the island, built by Arab-aligned powers during the period following the Islamic expansion of the 7th century. The structure the Portuguese attacked was probably reconstructed and expanded around 1480 by a nephew of Sultan Omar ibn Tuari of the Afar dynasty that governed the island before the invasion. The Portuguese did not build it, they burned it. Van Rensburg described the battle for Jebel Hawari as one that would have been extremely difficult for the attacking force. The defenders had the height, they had the walls, they had been there for centuries. The ruins of the gate, the walls, the burned timbers, they remained on the ridge for 500 years, silently misidentified, while the world assumed it knew who had built them. It is the pattern Socotra's history keeps returning to, a structure, a name, a story, assumed to belong to one era, one people, one origin, that turns out on examination to be something older, something different, something that rewrites what came before. The Christians were assumed to be Nestorian in a recognizable Eastern tradition. By the time they were found again, they had become something no visiting Christian could identify. The fort was assumed to be Portuguese. It was 7 centuries older. The island has been studied, cataloged, photographed, and named a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The understanding keeps giving way. There is another fort in the interior. Van Rensburg planned to investigate it in subsequent work. His findings there have not yet been published. It sits in the interior of the island, and it is presumably waiting to be misidentified. In April 2024, a paper appeared in the journal Nature, Ecology, and Evolution. The authors included Kendra Sirac and David Reich of Harvard University, along with Julian Jansen van Rensburg, who had excavated many of the skeletal remains the study analyzed, and a team of geneticists, archaeologists, and linguists from multiple institutions. The paper's title, Medieval DNA from Socotra, points to Eurasian origins of an isolated population at the crossroads of Africa and Arabia. It was the first ancient DNA study ever conducted on Socotra. For the study, the team analyzed genome-wide genetic data from 39 individuals, skeletal remains excavated from 6 locations across the island. The earliest individual in the dataset died between 641 and 668 CE, placing him within a single human generation of the Islamic expansion across Arabia. The study covered the period from roughly 650 CE to 1750 CE. The findings were specific. Medieval Socotri individuals could be modeled as deriving approximately 86% of their ancestry from a population resembling those of the Hadramaut, the coastal and mountainous region of what is now southern Yemen, directly across the Gulf of Aden from the island. The remaining roughly 14% was best explained by Iranian-related ancestry, with approximately 2% from the Indian subcontinent. This is consistent with the documented trade routes. Centuries of contact with Arabian and Persian merchants left a traceable genetic mark. What was absent from the genetic profile was as significant as what was present. Across the Arabian Peninsula, most populations carry varying levels of sub-Saharan African ancestry, the genetic trace of centuries of contact, trade, and movement from the African continent, beginning in the Holocene. On Socotra, that signal is entirely absent. The island sits 240 kilometers from the Horn of Africa, closer to the African continent than to the Arabian mainland at its nearest point. No Holocene African admixture. None. The paper's interpretation. Socotra was settled from Arabia. The probable timing, based on earlier mitochondrial DNA research, was around 4000 BCE. A founding population arrived from the Hadramaut coast and established itself on the island. In the genetic record, across more than 1,000 years of medieval skeletal data, they remain distinct. The Indian Ocean passed alongside them for 6 centuries, carrying sailors from India, Palmyra, Greece, Ethiopia, and Bactria. The Christians arrived and stayed for over 1,000 years. The Portuguese invaded. The Soviets anchored offshore. The Socotri remained genetically isolated themselves. But the earliest individual in the 2024 study died in 641 CE. The island had been continuously inhabited for 6,000 years before that. The DNA analysis tells us, with precision, who the medieval Socotri were. It says almost nothing about who they were before the Islamic expansion, before the Nestorian Christians, before the Roman-era trade routes, before the sailors who climbed into Hoke Cave and left their prayers in 6 different scripts. The 212 catalog of the cave's corpus documents, 193 readable inscriptions from visitors, spanning the 1st century BCE to the 6th century CE, 6 centuries, 6 writing systems. The entire commercial world of the ancient Indian Ocean left its mark in that cave. Not one of those 1903 texts is identifiably from a Socotri person. They did not write in the cave they presumably knew was there, or they wrote in something that looks, to modern eyes, like something else, or they did not write at all, not because they couldn't, but because writing was the medium of visitors, of merchants, of people passing through. The Socotri kept their knowledge in the one medium that couldn't be loaded onto a ship and carried away, the spoken word, passed mouth to ear, generation to generation, in a language with no text. Near a site called Dahaisi, in the interior of the island, there is a set of rock drawings. Therianthropic figures, half animal, half human, geometric designs, crosses. They were documented by Van Rensburg and De Geest in 2015. They are undated. No one knows when they were made or by whom or what they mean. They sit on the interior rock of an island at the edge of the known world, still waiting to be asked the right question. The archaeologists studying Socotra are working against 2 pressures simultaneously. The first is climate. 2 cyclones, Chapala and Meg, struck the island in November 2015. Within a week of each other, the first cyclones to make landfall in recorded Socotrian history. They changed the coastline, damaged structures, and altered drainage patterns that had been stable for centuries. The second pressure is Yemen's ongoing conflict. The war that has devastated the mainland has reached Socotra in the form of economic collapse, interrupted supply chains, and the departure of researchers who can no longer safely conduct extended fieldwork. The Socotra Karst Project's comprehensive survey of the island's cave systems, representing 25 years of work by De Geest, Hejna, and Bayans, is scheduled for publication in 2026. Whether it can be followed by further fieldwork is an open question. The island is running out of time in more than one direction at once. Socotra is still there. The cave is still there, 3 kilometers deep. Its incense burners still scattered near inscriptions that are still being translated, still being argued over. The Palmyrene tablet of Abgar, son of Abshamay, written in the summer of 258 CE, carried across open ocean and set against a stalagmite, is now held in the Austrian National Library in Vienna. The cave itself is not in Vienna. It is on the northeastern coast of Socotra, and it contains drawings of ships that have not been fully studied, in scripts that have not all been identified, left by people whose names we have, but whose lives we have not. The Socotri language is still spoken. Somewhere between 50,000 and 100,000 people still use it as a mother tongue, a range that tells you something about how difficult the island is to study and how contested even the most basic facts about it remain. The corpus of Socotri oral literature exists in libraries. The writing system exists. The first book in Socotri sits on a shelf somewhere. Whether there will be a second generation of children who grow up speaking it is a question that will be answered not by archaeologists or geneticists, but by the Socotri people themselves, and by the conditions under which they are being asked to make that choice. The Christians are gone, not the memory of them. Kalisa still appears on maps. The cross-inscribed stones are still there. The cave burials with their wooden crosses are still there. But the community that carried a version of Christianity for over 1,000 years, in isolation, without priests and without correction, until it became something no visiting Christian recognized, that community is gone. What it actually believed, how it actually practiced, what it understood itself to be, those records are not in Vienna. They are not in any archive. They are in the oral tradition of a people who had no way to write them down and who are now being asked to learn a different language. What Socotra actually was beneath the traders and the soldiers and the scientists and the spellinologists has no clean answer yet. And maybe that's the point. If this kind of history, the kind that keeps rewriting itself, that keeps pushing its origins backward, that keeps refusing to be what you thought it was, stays with you, subscribing helps more of it find you. A wooden tablet, a prayer, a god that did not appear. Abgar of Palmyra carried that tablet across open ocean, climbed into darkness, and set it down in the only place he knew to leave it. It sat there for 1,742 years before anyone found it. The cave is still dark.